how do I love someone else if I hate me? If I hate myself, how do I love them? Right? How can I support another person if I'm bankrupt? Right? If I don't have anything to support me, how can I support another person? How can you give life if you can't stay alive? Right? How can you feed life into other people if you're barely staying alive yourself? We have to take a moment, and the only person we're responsible for is in the mirror, right? We're responsible to others. It's a difference. So the first law of responsibility is you. You are the first law of responsibility. If you're going to apply this boundary in your life, you have to apply it to yourself first. So how does this play into our boundaries discussion? Look, an aspect of being responsible to in the Bible is not just that we're supposed to be giving, but we also have to set limits on the other person's destructive or irresponsible behavior that affects us. Okay? So being responsible to them is not just the giving part, it's also the setting the boundary part so that we have an understanding of how things work. Because if you allow them to completely be in self-destructive behavior that affects you, or you allow them to run rampant in your life, right, on those things, you're not being responsibility to the only person you're responsible for, right? You're trying to be responsible to them, but you're not even taking care of you, right? So look, the next plank in our life, right, is this responsibility. Remember, the first one is we're building a fence, not a wall, right? First one is God, right? God is the author of boundaries. He's the one who decides boundaries. He created them. He set life up with boundaries. He set the world up with boundaries before he even made man. When he gave man, he gave us boundaries to live by as well, too. God is the author of that. When you set a boundary, you are not violating God's principle. You are actually adopting God's way, okay, in your life, right? In the domain that he has given you to rule over, you are adopting his principle, right? And the first one we talked about is sowing and reaping. You cannot stop the process of sowing and reaping. This is what happens in the world, whether relationally, financially, however it works. If we plant a seed, whatever you do, this is sowing and reaping will be a process that happens in our life. And when we stand in the way of someone else receiving, reaping what they are sowing, they are not learning. We are enabling. Remember, we're doing that. So we have to set this boundary up and say, hey, I am no longer an enabler. Sowing and reaping will apply to your life just like sowing and reaping applies to my life. And we're going to learn together because I love you, right? Not because I'm mad at you. I love you. This is why we're doing this, right? And today we're setting the third one, right? Our third plank is responsibility, right? And we're saying, hey, now we're saying that I'm responsible for the person on this side of the fence, and I'm responsible to the person on the other side of the fence. So even if we just set a couple of these, we're going to have about 11 by the time we're done, just so you know. But even if we're setting a couple of these, you know what's cool about this? This 3 boundaries that I've just set over the past 3 weeks? I can hide behind them. Right? Your self-destructive behavior can't really hurt me. I can see you. I can see over it. I'm watching, but I'm protected. Right? Because these actions on that side of the fence that I'm setting my boundary on, right, no longer affect me. So I can work on me. I can be responsible for me. I'm still responsible to you in some areas, but we're eliminating the areas that I'm taking responsibility to you in, right? Now, for me to be responsible to you is to show you my fence planks. This is how I'm being responsible to you. Now we can learn how to be in relationship. One day, once we get all the fences up, we're going to build a gate, we can come in, right? Maybe you can come in and stay for a while and go back to the other side, however it works. But right now, when you set the boundaries, right? Wow, that's crazy. Okay. Right? We can still have a conversation. I can make comments, right? But it doesn't affect what I'm doing in my boundaries, right? So as we set these boundaries, we're building this process that allows us to be healthy on the inside, right? And when we're healthy, we can do things for God, right? But when we read these scriptures, especially if we read them out of context, love your neighbor as yourself. Paul says you have responsibility to these other people. If you read them and don't read the whole verse, right, or read the whole context, all you're doing is adopting someone else's responsibility in your life. And we can't read them out of context. We have to take the full thing and say, okay, God wants us to be a whole person helping other people, right? This is what we have to do. The first thing we have to do. So we have a responsibility to give need, right, for sure. But we also have a responsibility to limit their destructive behavior, limit their irresponsible behavior from affecting our place, right?